you two gentlemen. Well, start from the beginning. I mean, had you always wanted to make this kind of film? And how did you get around this, and what sort of deal did you do with the army?
Well, you know, we've been covering and reporting from conflict zones for 10, 15 years. You know, I'd been a cameraman on a film called Liberia and Uncivil War in 2004 as one of the only outsiders to live with a rebel group in Liberia. The group pushed Charles Taylor out of power. So, and that was a very immersive and visceral film. And, you know, we're very used to going into these places where people don't normally access and immersing ourselves into it. And so we wanted to make the most immersive and visceral war film we could. We went to the Korengal in 2007 initially on assignment for Vanity Fair. Sebastian is the writer, myself as the photographer. And once we got there, we looked at each other and we said, holy cow, we've got to make a film. Because what was going on there was so extraordinary. I mean, it was 2007, the world was focused on Iraq. And here in the Korengal Valley, 6-mile long valley, there was, you know, a fifth of all fighting in the whole of Afghanistan was taking place, and 70% of American bombs were being dropped here. And the company we were with was taking a 25% killed and wounded rate. And it was very clear the Afghan war had slipped out of control, and nobody really seemed to understand that back home. So we thought, okay, let's film the emotional terrain. Let's just bring it home and bring the war back home and make people think about, you know, it's very easy to say we're at war, but what emotionally does that mean? And we wanted to bring that home.
And what permissions did you have to get? I mean, what was the cooperation the army gave you? Because at no point watching the film did they tell you to bugger off, and yet you were right in the middle of it all.
Yeah, I mean, there's an embed system, and thousands of journalists have been embedded with U.S. forces. That is the only way to be with U.S. forces. You can't just waltz in there and say you want to make a documentary. And I was actually really very surprised. My first embed was 2005. I was never, and then later with Tim in 2007, 2008, we were never, I mean, much less censored. We were never even urged to report anything. We have footage of civilian casualties, Afghan casualties, that's in the movie. They knew we were, Tim filmed that. He was standing right next to soldiers, and no one ever said anything. And so the agreement with the military is simply one of liability, that if you get killed, they cannot be held responsible. But there's absolutely no agreement in terms of the content. If you make a documentary, if you go from journalist to documentary filmmaker, which obviously is what we were doing, you sign an agreement that you will show them a rough cut so that they can watch it for security or privacy concerns. Mm-hmm. So no overhead shots of bases. If there's a dead or wounded soldier, much like a car accident victim in network news, you can't show their face in a recognizable way. And we showed them the rough cut, and there were no issues.
And what camera were you using, Tim?
We used 2 Sony cameras, 2 high-def cameras, and you know, stuff. We kind of made the film ourselves. We funded it ourselves, and so we needed equipment that we could break, obviously, and afford to replace.
And I mean, were you near death? Did you have death-defying experiences on this?
Well, I mean, you know, they were taking a heavy casualty rate. You know, a number of the guys didn't make it back. You know, for me, you know, during the operation, you see, I went down a mountain in the middle of the night and broke my leg, and realizing that it was in the middle of a combat operation, we were very exposed on a mountainside. Had to walk, you know, carry on walking down it. You know, had my pack with all the cameras and equipment, and realized that they were carrying 100 pounds, and that, you know, do I want to throw this away or keep it? And if I keep it, I have to take it with me. And, you know, later on, there was a ceasefire. I was very lucky to get out. I got out to the air base where they operated on me to fit a metal plate. And some of the guys weren't so lucky. They woke me up in the middle of the night in the hospital and told me that 2 more had died and 4 were wounded. So it was a real, you know, it was a really, you know, extreme time. But we wanted to, you know, I really feel that in immersive work like this, that if you abandon yourself, you take yourself right to that edge, you know, the subjects recognize you're going to go there with them, and that breaks down something and enters into a very special place. And I feel that abandonment emotionally to the subject, where you just give yourself and you say, okay, whatever happens, I'm just going to do this, I think it passes over to the audience. And it's,
I mean, is there a part of you in a kind of bleak way that wants bad things to happen while you're filming, so you get stuff?
No, you know, I came off the back of making this film, you know, filming undercover reporting for Human Rights Watch on right-wing death squads in Sri Lanka, and frankly, this is what I do, and I've had those discussions with myself a long time ago about this stuff. And
yeah, I mean, but I should say, I mean, it's a good question, and it really speaks to a lot of journalism as well. Like, I know my fellow journalists, and even soldiers to an extent, if you go report on a war, and if you're embedded with a unit and you expect to see war, and nobody shoots at you, 99% of journalists will be disappointed. And that's just a reality. And likewise for combat soldiers. I mean, the big worry of the guys in the platoon we were with, their big worry coming over from Italy, where they're based, to the Korengal Valley, was that they would be, you know, sitting around for a year and not see any combat at all. But then when it happens, it's terrifying. It was my trip. Tim and I alternated trips, in part because we kept getting injured. My trip was, you know, when the Humvee got blown up, so I was shooting that video, and you know, it was a matter of a few feet between the bomb went off under the engine block instead of under us, me and the other soldiers, and I don't know if it would have killed us, but it would have messed us up pretty well. And when things like that happen to you, they stay with you, you know, and you sort of realize, like, those few feet that saved us, they have nothing to do with whether you're a good person or whether you believe in God. It's just math. It's random. And when that really sinks in, it changes how you see life, I think.
So, thank you.